So here we are at my podcast, No Safe Space. So what I really wanted to really touch bases on today was I want to talk about sexual abuse, sexual exploitation. I want to talk about things that we as a community or as people or as family members we do not discuss at all. It's a shameful topic for people. I think that's why people spend so many years in unhappy relationships or unhappy sexual fulfilling real relationships, because they're afraid that they're going to be judged, or they're going to not be accepted for whatever their fetish or trauma, or for whatever reason. Sex is a big issue. I believe that it's one of the main reasons why we have offenders who are not getting well. We have sex offenders. Of course, they're not going to get well. It's mandated for any therapist or any official to report it and get a hold of the police. So of course they're not going to speak about these things. So how, you know, we always are focused on, oh my gosh, this poor victim, and having so much animosity. And me being a survivor, I thought we have so much animosity towards the offender, but we don't realize what happened to them. There is something that transpired in their life that created the person that they were. And after learning and studying so much about sexual trauma and the effects it does on the brain, I learned a very important thing, that at the time of some pedophilia is basically them never progressing past the age they were abused. And so they go on to have sexual fantasies of children this age, and that's the age they were when they were being molested or abused or whatever. And we all have different makeups. Our DNA, the way our mind and our brains comprehend sexual abuse and trauma, we all handle things differently. And just so happened that offender, they begin to like it. That's what arouses them. But for another person, that's something just to talk about, creates a downward spiral emotionally for them, not being able to handle even speaking about it. So everybody's different. But for years, I thought, I want to put harm on offenders. But then I got to thinking, well, in my relationship, my boyfriend, he said, wait a minute, you can't be like that. That's like, not accepting. You cannot not accept a person because of they created the abuse, because they've been through abuse too. So that's when I really sat and I really thought about it. And if we're, as a community, because this is like a collective, everyone should, really sit down and really think about, yes, wanting to harm a child who's innocent, yes, that's wrong. But we all were children. They were children, and they more than likely were harmed. And it's sad, but if they don't, whenever a person speaks about sexual trauma and abuse, it really takes a weight off of you. Like, you don't have to say your name. I really want to get as many stories or testimonies or whatever I can, for people to be able to, you don't got to say your name or anything, and please don't, I don't want to know the harm that, if you've done any or anything like that. But I'm very curious about when were the first time you ever remember having a sexual experience? How did that make you feel? And was it traumatic, or did you go on to find it pleasurable? I'm just trying to get an idea, and I'm trying to get people to be able to speak about their pain or their trauma, or something that is holding them down or holding them back from being the best you. And if being the best you is a sex addict, or being the best you is a survivor, or being the best you want to stay a victim for life, I hate to imagine that somebody would want to stay a victim. I mean, I spent almost 40 years playing this victim role, and it's not very nice. It's not fun. You carry it in your relationships. You lash out, and you can't be yourself. And I want everyone to really experience, and from the offender, from the victim, from the whatever, I want people to be able to be themselves and speak about what their demons are, because without a voice speaking, without you being able to tell what's really, really holding you down, people are never gonna get well. Us as a community, we're not going to get well. We focus so much on, okay, they're gonna lock them up. Of course the offender is not gonna speak, but as long as they hold on to that, they are dealing with that every single day. They have this demon that's constantly plaguing them, the secrets, the things that they have to hide, and the things that they got to go through as the perpetrator is got to be a grueling, horrific thing inside their mind. It's always the shame, and it's always the cover up, because God, they know if they don't and if they're exposed, they're going to go to prison or jail. And so I this is I really started this podcast because I really wanted people to come forward and as victims and be able to speak about something maybe that they, or confront someone that abused them in a healthy way, and get over their heartache and their pain and things that's really, really holding you down. That's the reason why I created, began to think about this no safe space. I haven't heard anyone have this type of podcast that has the conversations, that talks about the things that people don't want to talk about. It's a shameful topic. It's all, what did that person do? Or oh, everybody pushes sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. It's like something that's pushed under the mat. We cannot push things under the mat and expect for sick people in a sick environment to get well. It's not going to happen, not in this life or the next. But if we start focusing on the solution to the problem, is there is strength in numbers. When a person feels comfortable and safe and not judged, they're going to be able to speak. They're going to be able to relieve that burden that they've been carrying forever, how many years that they've been carrying. No one deserves to carry that burden of sexual devious, being deviously, I don't know exactly how to say it, but being, having a sex, whether it's addiction or trauma or whatever it is, nobody deserves to carry it. I carried that weight for so many years, and it created such heartache in my life. It really prevented me from being the best woman, best wife, the best mother, just holding on to so much stuff that it's not useful, it's not beneficial, but I held on to it just to the bitter end. I still have some issues that I wouldn't even say issues at this point. Once I spoke about it, I started to get well. And, it's really crazy is that this past year, I had some suicidal, I literally, I just don't know. I just had this, I kept hearing this voice of one of the people that did, some harm to me when I was younger. And I kept hearing their voice, scream. It was almost like it was taunting me. And I just couldn't understand why is this happening? And I was trying to run. I was trying to escape my body, but it's not possible. And I was like, literally, if I had the courage, I would just literally like I just wanted to just take off my own head. It was so horrible. Like I contemplated hanging myself, and I went through like, but the miracle was about to happen. Like seriously, it wasn't for years. I actually been whenever something traumatic or it's like something like, say I'm getting into an argument or something very heated debate, I will actually begin to suffocate. So what happens is I get this coughing spell, and literally I can't breathe, and it goes on sometimes for hours. I mean, I remember at one point I think it happened for like 4 hours, and literally to where my throat actually begins to close. Well, that was a form of trauma that I experienced. I was kidnapped at 11 years old, and I became a victim of sex trafficking. My first experience with sex was being given drugs and sold. So I lost my virginity to someone I didn't know, and in very heartbreaking situation. But there was this particular a couple actually, a woman actually lured me, and a couple took me, but and I was at their you know, I was with them for 3 years, and it was horrific. But they got me addicted, so of course I'm eager to come back to them because I want drugs because I know that they're gonna make me feel different. I'm not gonna feel the way that I feel. So there was this one guy that they used to send, and his name was Mitch. I'll never forget it, right? But his wife actually died in a closet. I remember he used to always say, Susan, you have a guest. And his wife, like, literally, I don't know if they were just into that whole strangulation thing and she asphyxiated and died in the closet. But I used to hate this moment because I knew that I was going to have to go through the endure of the waiting game. Am I going to die today? So in my mind, I had to accept, okay, if I die, then I'm going to go back and I'm going to get to see my grandmother, and I'm not going to have to go through this anymore. So being dead, that actually could be one of the best things that could happen. So I accepted that, but it's just the whole fear of being strangled and hung on with a rope, being suspended in the air, and you're taking your last breath. And it's just that waiting, waiting to fall out. And I would wake up in my own urine. And there's so many times that I've been given CPR as a young, not even a teenager at this point, right? Because of a sickness, and it's called sadism, I would honestly say, because anybody that's a thing. But people everywhere, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is if you're harming somebody against their will. I feel like it's a bad thing. We don't want to harm anyone, but if that's your sexual preference in your relationships or with a willing participant, I believe that all for it. I'm all for being your true self in your truth. But not harming someone that's going to go on to ripple and affect their life for long term. So there it was, that moment. So my boyfriend, he says, "Kat, I start to feel like we're getting into an argument, and all of a sudden my throat starts closing, and it's a physical response to emotional trauma, and it is so real. My tongue will begin to swell, like I'm the same thing if you find like in a drowning victim, they'll have like pockets that burst in their lungs, and their tongue swells where they're gasping for air, and your lungs are trying to get that last breath in. My tongue will actually swell to the point, and my throat begins to close, like it's trying to block off anything from getting into my throat, into my airway, or out. It is the most insane physical response to an emotional trauma. It wasn't till this past year that I identified with my coughing spells and my, it wasn't an anxiety attack. It was a literally like I'm suffocating. My body was physically doing that. So I was like, oh my gosh. It wasn't until he said,